Good afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is Zayas. I'm the Vice President for National and International Affairs of the Ana Jimenez University System, and I thank you for being here. I know I'm the only thing standing between you and sunny San Diego in a very nice day, so we'll try to move quickly through the presentation. Suppose I made you an offer that would increase your chances of getting a better job at a better pay, opens business opportunities, increases your intellectual capacity, doubles your ability to communicate with others in the community and throughout the world, helps you to understand the world better, and increases your self-esteem. Would you accept it? Would you be interested in something like this? Well, probably all of us already got that offer, or most of us, and we've already accepted it. And we know that dual language education is the most effective way of closing the English skills gap between English language learners and native English speakers. We've seen this graph a million times. It's the most researched methodology, I think, in the educational system. And it not only helped to close the gap between English language learners and native English speakers, but it also helps you to maintain the mastery of your native language. Native English speakers score higher in English than in English only or mainstream settings. They have stronger, both the English speakers and the English language learners. They have stronger reading, writing, and math scores. They're more satisfied with what happens in school. They have more respect for diversity, cultural identity, and have better self-esteem. And all of this is amply researched and proven over and over again. But we know why this happens. Part of the reason why is that we already know that there's a common underlying proficiency, as Cummins shared with us in his theory, and that because you know your native language well, you're able to transfer the learning from that language to the new language, which in this case is English. So it's not something that we need to be surprised about. We know how it works. We know it works. But then, being bilingual is really so much more than just learning English. If you look at the literature, if you look at the research, you'll see different studies, different settings, different languages, all reaching the same conclusion. Being bilingual has significant intellectual, academic, professional, quality of life, and societal advantages. The intellectual advantages. Being bilingual has proven to be beneficial in intellectual development, from pregnancy to newborns to old age. Exposure to a bilingual environment helps you develop your intellectual capacity even before you speak a language. And there are studies that demonstrate that. And icing on the cake, it delays the onset of dementia for 4.1 years and Alzheimer for 5.1 years. Being bilingual has a positive effect on brain development. Some studies say that it develops more the gray matter in our brains. Others say it's a white matter, whether it's one or the other or both. The reality is that brain develops further because you are bilingual. And all of this happens, and studies and research have demonstrated this, faster and with less effort. It's like getting a lifetime membership to a gym where you don't have to sweat, because your exercising will be done very efficiently and without a lot of work. And if you look at all the research that has been done, These are just a few of the intellectual abilities, capacities that improve when you're bilingual. Concept formation, metacognition, analogical reasoning, classification, visual, spatial, creativity, solving complex problems, task switching, and very importantly, the control or executive functions of the brain. You are better at conflict monitoring, at planning, at attentional control, and suppression of habitual responses, meaning that you're able to control what you concentrate on. And this is not something I made up. It's fully backed by research. Not only, as I mentioned, here in the US, but in Europe, in Canada, in Asia. Being bilingual positively impacts key intellectual capacities. So really, it shouldn't be a surprise to us that dual language programs work. Because what dual language programs do is that they turn monolingual students into bilingual students. And by turning them into bilingual students, they're able to take advantage of all the intellectual benefits of becoming bilingual. They are able to build up on that advantage. So that's why bilinguals in general, whether they're in a dual language program or not, have been proven through research to have better, understand better the symbolic representation of print. They do better on achievement tests. And on college entrance exams, if you have training in a foreign language, you are likely to do better in a college entrance exam. But that's not enough. Being bilingual also impacts your job and career. Bilinguals have more job and better job career opportunities. If you do a search anytime on Career Builder, you will have over 15,000 jobs that have the keyword bilingual in them. That means that if you're bilingual, either that's a requirement for the job or something that is preferred for that job. If you do it on monster.com, you'll find 40 pages or more with the bilingual keyword. Bilinguals are likely to be better compensated. Nationwide, studies have demonstrated that a bilingual professional or worker makes 5 to 20% more in their base rate. In California, state employees make an average of 58 cents more if they're bilingual. So if you want to raise the minimum wage, you can do it without having to pass a law. You can become bilingual. In Florida, it's over $7,000 in difference. Bilingual organizations like ours, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the Ana Jiménez University system, have been forced to raise the minimum salaries in our pay scales by an average of 10 to 20%. And all of this is for jobs that require you to be bilingual, to use more than one language. Can you imagine what would happen if employers realized that bilinguals have all these other advantages that go beyond whether you need to use a second language or not in the job? But there are other advantages of being bilingual. We all know, and this is preaching to the choir, we know that Hispanic and Asians are the fastest growing US population groups. By 2015, 34% of Americans' first language will not be English. The United States is the fourth largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. We just passed Spain. 21%, or 61 million Americans, speak a language other than English at home. But of these, 41.6% speak English not very well. So they're really not bilingual, or at least only partly on the way to becoming bilingual. So that means that if you're bilingual, you have a better opportunity of communicating and serving and working with these population groups. Being bilingual increases personal and national competitiveness. The two fastest growing groups, buying power, are Hispanics and Asians. And if you look at trade, and we all have heard about globalization, if you look at trade, just to give you an example, 403 trillion US exports go to Spanish-speaking countries. 402 trillion go to Asia. In addition to that, as if it weren't enough, bilingual improves your quality of life. You are able to communicate, as I mentioned earlier, with more people in more places. And to give you an example, by learning in Spanish, in addition to knowing English, you double the number of people in the world that you can speak to. Access to other cultures and languages also means access to different concepts, different material, and aesthetic production of those cultures. And just by knowing English and Spanish, for example, and also Italian, by the way, you know that querer and amar are not really the same thing as want and love. But is there a querer in English? So there are concepts that are tied directly to the language. And if you know more than one language, you learn new concepts, new ways of looking at life. And by doing this, by being able to communicate with others, you actually learn much better who you are. What is the difference between you and the other person that is different from you? You become more tolerant, and you learn to appreciate yourself better and increase your self-esteem. So bilingual also improves quality of life. Now, after saying all this, I think it's a paradox that bilingualism is not only is not a national priority. It's a priority for us at NABE, but it should be a priority for this nation, because all these advantages warrant making it a national priority. To summarize, why should it be a national priority? There are proven intellectual, academic, professional, economic, and personal advantages to being bilingual. Our society needs a bilingual labor force to serve the fastest growing segments of its population. As you know, many school districts are already majority non-English speaker. And you know that in the health industry, there is a shortage of professionals at large, but especially of bilingual or multilingual professionals. And like we saw earlier, being bilingual makes business sense. So even though these things are true, the fact of the matter is that estimates that are made, or really guesstimates that are made of the percentage of the population of the US that is bilingual, hover around 20%, 62 million Americans. And this is based on a question that doesn't really tell you whether a person is bilingual or not. It's based on asking what language is spoken at home. And the fact you speak another language at home doesn't make you bilingual. Actually, it is a very biased question, because what it is saying is that English is spoken everywhere else and Spanish at home. So it doesn't tell you how many bilinguals there are in the US. And when you add to that, as I mentioned earlier, 25 million, 41% of those that speak another language at home don't speak English very well, definitely that doesn't measure bilingualism in the US. If you go to 2001, we're in 2014. If you go to 2001, the only Gallup poll that I could find said that 26% could hold a conversation in another language. Holding a conversation is not exactly a good definition of being bilingual. It says that only 19% consider essential learning to speak. Nothing about reading, writing, to speak another language. But on the other hand, 77% considered essential that immigrants learn English. Obviously, those that responded to that Gallup poll didn't know that it was advantage. There are a lot of advantages to being bilingual. So, why is this a problem? Being bilingual is so low on the national agenda that we don't even ask that question in the census. And if we want to look at polls, we have to go 13 years back to find that question being asked. At most, only 12 to 25% of the US population is bilingual, meaning they do not have access to all those advantages that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So the result is that learning English is the only thing that people talk about. It's not becoming bilingual, it's learning English. And I'm not saying there's anything bad, of course, of learning English. Everybody needs to learn English in a nation that uses English as a common language. But there is a disconnect between what society, business, the nation, and your intellectual development needs and what we discuss in our national agenda. So, because there is this disconnect, what do? The national agenda becomes, like the Gallup poll said, let's make sure that immigrants learn English. And because being bilingual is not important, it's okay if they learn English, quote unquote, in programs where they have to unlearn their native language. And what we have as a result of those that have to go through these type of programs, the result is that they don't learn English well, and they lose their native language proficiency. So what do you have? You have students, citizens, residents that do not have mastery of either language. So it's not learning English, it's not being bilingual, it's not being able to master either one well. And I think we should all agree, and in a setting like this one, we all agree that the goal of a learning environment should not be to unlearn, but to construct new learning. So we need to refocus the problem, the discussion. The problem lies in defining English language learning as the overarching focus of bilingual education. Focus on the English language learning shifts public and academic discussion to the arguments made against some forms of bilingual education. After all, if you think about it, if the only important thing is to learn English, once those students learn English, why do we need bilingual education? And when we have this, not we, but when people have this frame of mind, we lose time from presenting the real advantages of being bilingual. Instead of discussing what's the fastest way of learning English or the best way of learning English, we should be discussing what is the best way of making sure that the greater proportion possible of Americans become bilingual. The main focus of bilingual education, I propose, and I know all of you, or most of you would agree, is to promote, create, and develop a learning environment that prepares bilingual students who turn into bilingual achievers, bilingual workers and professionals with the skills and confidence needed to exercise and enjoy the advantages of being bilingual for themselves and their community. So, what can we do to refocus this discussion? I think we should start emphasizing, promoting, defending advocating for the need to have lifelong bilingual education. We already know that there are exemplary dual language programs throughout the nation, and we've been to presentations on how they work. We've talked to people that make them work. We know that it works well at the elementary level. And we've moved a lot in the last few years, from not even daring to talk about that to making it a daily recognition that dual language programs work. They can be successful and they benefit everybody. Now, problem is, if you think about it, if you have a successful elementary level dual language program and you don't have an intermediate, then dual language becomes a transition program. If you have an intermediate and you don't have a high school, it becomes a transition program. If you don't have a dual language university education, it becomes a transition program. And we know that transition programs are not the best way of conducting bilingual education. So we need to build on the success of dual language education at the elementary level to develop lifelong bilingual education and to make that a priority. So we need to go higher than elementary ed, but we also need to think of what happens before, pre-K, what happens at home. We need to start discussing, promoting the idea that bilingual education is not just for elementary. It should be a lifelong goal for education. Now, some people might say, well, you know what happens is that the only reason why it's in elementary is because dual language is more difficult after elementary. And you know that there are studies that show that adults, when we learn another language, we have sometimes more problems or it's more difficult. And it's true that we might not be able to lose an accent, but there are other things that balance that, because adult students are better at vocabulary building. So we might keep our accent, but we might develop vocabulary faster. And adults bring other things. Older children and adults bring other things into the educational environment. They have greater motivation, discipline, maturity, and very importantly, they have a stronger foundation in their native language. So we cannot just say we stop at elementary because it's more difficult for adults. And that is the problem that we had at the Ana Geméndez University system 10 years ago. We decided we wanted to serve our community in the States. And as you probably well know, there are more Puerto Ricans in the States than in Puerto Rico at the present time. So we said 10 years ago, we are going to open up a campus in Orlando. And when we looked at that, we said we're not going to take our Spanish language programs because our community needs to learn English. We're not going to just do another English language program because there are plenty of very good ones at the universities already there. So we want to do bilingual education. And we started looking around. We saw, at that time, no other higher education bilingual dual language immersion programs. So we could have said, well, let's do transition, let's do intensive ESL, or let's forget about bilingual. But we said we wanted to take a well-grounded risk. We knew from the research that we had studied that dual language immersion was what worked in bilingual education. We had the experience of knowing how to serve adults and young adults because we had been developing adult programs for many years. And we realized that the need that was being unmet in our community was precisely opening doors to access for adults, Hispanic adults, those 16 million that do not speak English very well, those that were educated in their native country but migrated as young or older adults, so their previous education was in Spanish, and those that found themselves in their new city, in their new country, not being able to continue their university education because they did not have the English skills needed to function in an all-English program, and they didn't have the cultural understanding to be able to function in an all-English program. So we decided, since we couldn't find any existing dual language program at the university level, to create our own. And we call that our discipline-based dual language immersion model. What we did is we took the non-negotiable characteristics of what a good dual language program should be, and we paired it with our experience in knowing how adults learn in a university setting, and created a program that was true to dual language immersion and took advantage of the fact that we would be serving adults. And these are the 7 elements of that program. And I'm going to go quickly over them just to give you an idea. We'll have other chances to talk about that. But to give you an idea that dual language immersion is possible at the university setting with adults. First of all, we adopted the 50-50 model. All of our courses are 50% in English and 50% in Spanish, except, of course, the Spanish courses and the English courses. So that if you're taking accounting, auditing, instructional methodology, business, 50-50. We did that through structuring or developing modules that would structure the learning environment so that we were sure it was 50-50. We separated the 2 languages. We don't repeat the same thing in both languages. We just separated some of the content in English, some of the content in Spanish. And we adopted the idea of a sheltered environment. All of this is part of those non-negotiables of dual language. But one of the challenges of working with adults is that you have to do in much less time what at the elementary level you have 6 years to do. So we wanted to make sure that the language learning experience was intensive, was continuous, and never stopped while you were at the university. So what we did is that to every single course, we added language objectives. That means that if you're taking an auditing class for your accounting bachelor's degree, you have to learn accounting and prove you master accounting, but you also have to prove that you can write a management letter in English and Spanish, that you can give an effective presentation to the management of the company in English and Spanish. And you are graded 30% for that language content. By doing this, we turn every single faculty member into a language teacher. We turn every single class into a language class, so that language learning became a full-time job while you were at the university. Number 3, we wanted to make sure that language learning was not conversational, because we want to prepare bilingual professionals, and professionals need to read and write. And we wanted to make sure that it was not like in some settings, especially online, that it's only reading and writing. You need to do all 4 aspects of language learning. So in our modules, we made sure that we included activities for all 4. But we also knew that our students needed coursework in English and Spanish to be able to provide the foundation for that language learning across the curriculum that I told you a little while ago. So we have a 4-level sequence of courses. All of our students have to take at least 2 years of English and 2 years of Spanish. So general education component is very heavy on the English part and Spanish. Number 5, because our students come in different levels, we do placement testing. So we know exactly at what level they are and what is the best place for them to start in that 4-level sequence that I just told you about. Again, to emphasize that adults need more time in fewer years to develop their language skills, we wanted to provide easy access to develop their language skills outside of the classroom. So we developed what we call eLab, which is a whole series of tools from tutoring to language development, skills development software that our students can access not only on campus, but also outside of campus. And finally, and very importantly, all of our staff and all of our faculty needs to be bilingual. We want them to model what we want our students to be. We want them to show by everything they do that the students can do it also. So that makes it, I told you earlier that we had to increase our pay scale. Well, part of the reason is this: we needed to have bilingual staff. But also, we have put together a very intensive, both faculty and staff, professional development program so that they become more conscious not only of language differences, but also of cultural differences. So those are the 7 elements, and this has been happening for 10 years. We're currently serving approximately 3,000 students in 5 campuses in 3 states, Florida, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. 73% of our students are women. The average age is 38, and 60% of them are non-US born or educated. They live in the US, but they started their education somewhere else. It has been successful. We offer 29 associate, bachelor's, and master's programs. Over 95% of our students report in student satisfaction surveys that they feel more confident of their mastery of their English and their Spanish language. And we measure their performance both in language objectives and professional objectives at midpoint and at capstone. And at both levels, they're satisfactory. And we see that they move from satisfactory to very good as they go from midpoint to capstone. And more importantly, we've already graduated 2,124 bilingual professionals. So we go back to our original question and the reason why I shared with you that it is possible to do dual language immersion with adults. It is possible to have bilingual education at all levels. It is possible if you maintain and incorporate and are true to dual language principles. You adapt those principles to the characteristics of the level you're teaching in or you're working with, and you consider both the needs and the characteristics of the students you're about to serve. So, what is holding bilingual education back from lifelong bilingual education, from making lifelong bilingual education a national priority? I have a hunch that I want to share with you today, and the only reason to do this is to start a discussion going, so that eventually, hopefully, we can talk about lifelong bilingual education as our goal. We're up against a hostile environment. You saw the Gallup poll. 77% believe the only thing they believe is essential is that immigrants learn English. The fact that the census doesn't even ask the question shows you how far away we are from making lifelong bilingual education a national priority. So we're not in a very friendly environment if we want to work towards lifelong bilingual education. But we also are up against ourselves sometimes. we need to move away from the sole focus on English language learning. It's a good strategy because it shortens the distance from the environment. You feel more at home in an environment that only is interested in everybody learning English. But it allows the opponents of lifelong bilingual education to set up the agenda. It makes it more difficult to question their premises. And it makes it more difficult for you to say, as a bilingual educator, you know, being bilingual is a lot more than learning English. There are a lot more advantages. Okay? So if we don't work with ourselves and change our discourse, our advocacy, our premises, we end up having to accept things like the one in the red there. If it's the best way for learning English and they can do it in 6 years, why bother after that? We need to change, as bilingual educators, how we present bilingual education, even in a hostile environment. So, I think we should think of an agenda for advocacy for lifelong bilingual education. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to do bilingual education well. The fact that research supports bilingual education is based on the fact that we know what we're doing and we do a good job and we do not compromise on dual language principles. And we need to continue doing it well. We need to change the subject. It is not just about speaking English and learning English. We need to establish a clear connection between the advantages of being bilingual and what we do as bilingual educators. We need to be proud of what we do. We need to flaunt it. You know, sometimes when you go into the elevator and you're speaking another language and somebody that doesn't understand the language comes in, they start looking at you like, they either look at you with envy or with disgust. Many of them would say, well, you know, they're probably talking about me. Well, I think we should, in a situation like that, speak the language we're speaking louder. Do not stop using that language because they either realize that they are at a disadvantage or they say, well, you know, maybe there's something in this about being bilingual. I read an article by Nelson that says that we should promote bilingual envy. And I think that's a very good phrase. But we need to really be proud of being bilingual. And we need to make this part of our responsibility as a bilingual educator. We need to advocate for bilingual education and bilingual education for what bilingual education really is, which is a lot more than learning English. Now, we should transform national education priorities. Everybody knows that the United States of America needs to focus on STEM plus H. Everybody talks about that. And it's a nice acronym. And in the US, we know that educational projects are based on acronyms or catchy phrases. Well, I think we should start talking about STEM plus H plus B. The important thing here is plus B, because being bilingual needs to become a national priority. And the only reason I have stopped you from going to sunny San Diego this afternoon is because I want us to reflect on that. I want us to talk about that and add to our duties as bilingual educators a responsibility to promote a bilingual nation. Thank you. So if you have any questions or comments. Yes.
It's not hard for some people, but even some bilingual teachers say that
Yeah, you're right, and that's why I said part of what we need to battle with is ourselves. One of the things we have to do in our university system, in our bilingual program, we have to convince our students that they need Spanish. We've had to give them presentations on commons and on transfer of learning. Because they say, I am here to learn English. I'm not interested in anything else. So you're right. It's a paradox that happens, but that's why we need to talk about these things, to try to change that. Any other comment, question? Well, yes. Excuse me, I can't. Oh, yes, science, technology, engineering, math, plus health. I don't know why they didn't put the H there at the beginning. I guess after they came up with this nice STEM acronym, they said, ooh, we forgot health. Well, what I'm saying, ooh, we forgot bilingual. But that health is the H. Huh? Oh, okay. Okay, well, thank you very much, and enjoy your evening.